Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Miss KK and this is The Wave. On this episode, we are talking about Iitalapata, or what is known as an Oshiwambo kitchen party. If you are new here, thank you very much for stopping by. Really appreciate having you on board. And if you are already a returning subscriber, I really love you guys and appreciate for always stopping by and engaging with our content either in the comment section below or on our various social media platforms, especially on Instagram. I really like your engagement there. Alright, today we are talking about Iitalapata as I mentioned, and I'm just going to go briefly on what is Iitalapata, why is it important, when does it happen, and what happens if you don't have Iitalapata. So Iitalapata is a very important ceremony in an Oshiwambo tradition, especially if you are an Oshiwambo lady married to an Oshiwambo guy. If you maybe get married to a non-Oshiwambo Oshiwambo partner, things may be a bit different. And if you are maybe married in interracial marriage, things may be different, because then you can't really reinforce that you strictly follow your culture, because there's another culture to consider. So what exactly is Iitalapata? Iitalapata is just that kitchen where the lady's parents and the lady's grandparents are officially getting introduced to the guy's parents and the guy's grandparents. So in Oshiwambo culture, when you get married as a lady, when you are sent off to your in-law, the day you leave, your parents and your grandparents aren't allowed to accompany you when you are going. So they're basically sending you off to a very strange family. They don't know the condition of that house. They don't know, they haven't met your parents in-law. They don't know where you are going to. So it always leaves them with a bit of uncomfortability that they are sending off their child to this family, although they've done a bit of introduction, but even in that process, they don't get to meet each other. It's like they send an in-law or an uncle that comes to announce the wedding, then they send, someone that brings the suitcase with everything, but they never actually, your parents-in-laws never actually get to meet. So Iitalapata is that event where your parents and your grandparents are officially coming to your in-laws and they get introduced to each other. There's a celebration, and from there, you guys are then one family and you can actually visit each other freely. So that is really a high level of what Iitalapata is. I may have simplified it, but that's my understanding of what Iitalapata is. And I'm also not really well versed in culture, so if I maybe say something that you don't agree with, please bear with me and add your commentary in the comment section below. Why is it important? Like I've mentioned, it's important because number one, it unites both family. Number two, it gives your parents a peace of mind that they know where you are well off, you have a place to go home, you have a kitchen of your own where you can make your own food, and things are okay with you even if they are not there with you, especially the lady's parents. It gives them that peace of mind. And also because it actually unites the two family, it actually strengthens that bond. So if something were to happen to my family, to my husband's family, my mother can easily come even if I'm not there, because she was welcome in that house. Whereas if they never met each other, it becomes very difficult for her to go and offer help when she wasn't actually officially introduced in that house. That is some of the reason why Iitalapata is very important. When does it happen? So basically, traditionally, you are only allowed to have Iitalapata once you have a child, or as soon as you find out you're expecting. But with a lot of things changing nowadays, I personally don't have a child and I'm not expecting, but we had our Iitalapata last weekend. But it's because there's a lot that has happened and culture is evolving, and there's a lot of reason why you would want to delay having babies. Just to mention a few, you want to spend time with your husband before you bring in kids, because kids are a responsibility, and once you have kids, it changes a few things. I must say it changes a few things. Number two, you maybe want to travel and explore without the responsibility of kids, and life is just expensive in general. You might want to achieve a few things financially before you bring in kids in the picture, because once you bring in kids, it's the nanny's cost, it's nappies costs, and it's school fees cost. So it's just a lot of things. So there's a lot of reason why you wouldn't want to have kids immediately, and that's why culture has started accepting people having Iitalapata without putting pressure for them to give birth immediately. So traditionally, only as soon as you have kids or you are expecting, you could host it, but nowadays you can host it at any point in time after the wedding. So that is when it's roughly likely to happen. And what happens if it doesn't happen? So basically, this is where things start getting trickier, especially if your family is very traditional and they like to follow tradition strictly. So there are two things, especially only around death. That is when things get complicated. So if you don't have Iitalapata and you as a lady passes away, that means your family never came to view where you stay, so they can't come for your funeral, they can't come for your death because they were never invited in that house. And because actually Iitalapata is one of the things that officiate in Oshiwambo marriage traditionally, so you are actually not considered married if you don't do the Iitalapata or the kitchen party. So if you die, that means you go get buried back where you came from, your mother's family. So that means your husband can't have the comfort of going to visit, you know, the wife's grave whenever he wants to, because you're going to be buried back at your family's side. And then if your husband were to die, on the other hand, your family also can't come over and help you mourn the loss of your husband, because again, they were not welcome in this family. So you're gonna be there mourning alone. So basically, those are some of the things that really gets complicated, especially if you are married to another Oshiwambo speaker. But if you are married, maybe interracial marriage, things may be treated a bit lightly, and this may not apply to you. But that's some of the reason why parents will always insist, kids, please wake up, do your Iitalapata things, let things be free, let us be moving between the families free, let us be prepared for any eventuality, because we know death is eventually going to happen. The timing of it is what we don't know when exactly. So that is one of the reasons why Iitalapata is very important. Okay. So then let's discuss now the planning. So we basically got married in December 2020. So we've been married just over a year and a few months now, for a year and 4 months or so. And we wanted initially to have our Iitalapata, because last year it was out of the question. We were just so tired from the wedding process. We just had to recover financially. We had to just also sit and think what we want to do with our marriage and also just enjoy each other. So we didn't really have time for Iitalapata things last year. But then towards the end of last year, we started thinking maybe it's time for us to have this party, so that we can just get over and done with. Because the earlier you do it, the better you can also continue with other things in life. So we initially wanted to do it around Independence, because like there was a public holiday there, and because we live now in Windhoek and we need to do this kitchen party back at home in the north, we needed it to be at a place where it's convenient for the people that are going to be invited. So if you do it maybe on a weekend but there's no public holiday, for people that you're inviting that needs to travel, you need to also consider that. But then Independence, we actually discussed this with our parents, and they said it's a bit too short notice. We must try and push it over Easter, and Easter also have a few other public holidays. So we actually eventually ended up having ours around the Easter weekend. Okay, so I just want to go over now the critical things when you are planning Iitalapata. So if I can just explain again what Iitalapata actually entails. So as a lady, when you move over to your in-laws, you are likely to go find your husband with a room where you are going to be staying. That may be a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, depending on how your husband built the house. But the way Oshiwambo households are set up, especially if it's not really a modern house, you generally have a place where you sleep and then you have a place where you cook. But a guy wouldn't really set up a place where you cook, because by then he was a bachelor and he didn't need the place where you cook, and he ate at his mother's kitchen. So you wouldn't find a place where you cook. So what you then do in this process is actually setting up that place where you cook and that place where you store your things. And that is one of the first things that you need to do. For as long as you are you are thinking of hosting your Iitalapata, you need to start budgeting for the structure where you're going to be cooking and the structure where you're going to be storing your things. And the structure where you're going to be storing your things is very important, because especially for a lot of, if you had a wedding back in the days, maybe not during Corona, but back in the days where people really gave gifts and they gave, baskets and glasses and stoves and things like that in the wedding process, you normally have a lot of gifts. And for a lot of ladies, they let those gifts stay back at their families, at their parents' house, until they find a place where you can store your things. So it's really also a good opportunity for you to build your storage place and move all your things. And that's the one thing that you need to actually bear in mind. So like I've mentioned, I'm going to put up the pictures of the storage room where we actually constructed. You can build most of the time in Oshiwambo setting, in Northern Namibia basically, most of the time this storage places are built out of corrugated iron. But you can also, if you can afford, you can also build just a proper brick storage house, or you can build a hut. But it becomes very difficult, especially this time of the year, because remember, huts are built using grass, and it's specific grass, and that grass is harvested at a certain time of the year. Like right now, even if we wanted to make a hut, where do we get the grass this time of the year, because the grass is still green. We never actually did the hut, we actually just did the corrugated iron structure for storing, and actually the kitchen place where we need to cook. But because we're going to be cooking in the sun during the day, you need a place for shade because the sun really gets extremely hot. So I'm going to put up the two structures that we actually built in order for us to be able to be ready to host this party. So if I can just go over it in Oshiwambo, wapumbo masiga, nokatala hatakasigiro masiga, upopuka kunonzile shandu tatereke, wapumbo nduda kupungura, mudu autroma kanowenga aperepo hango, nusira we ni jawe and everything. Basically, those are the two things that you need for you to be able to ready to host this party. So now let's discuss when the actual event happens. So who do you actually invite? Like I've mentioned, Iitalapata is not the same as a wedding. You don't send the invites to a lot of people. You really send the invites to close family members, because remember I said Iitalapata is to officiate the two families to unite, and it's mainly meant for the people that couldn't come to the wedding because of traditional reasons. Your parents, your grandparents, your parents and your grandparents, close friends, and your sibling. And surprisingly enough, I didn't know that your brothers aren't actually allowed to come to your kitchen party, but whoop, whoop, my brothers did come to the kitchen party. So I don't know why they are not allowed to, but that's also just the one thing that Mbezi told us at a recently held Hungi event. So it's normally just supposed to be a close knit of friends. So when I sent out my invites, I actually told Meme, and Meme invited her close friends. And then I invited some of the bridesmaids that I felt like needed to be there, or that I felt like could make it. So you don't have to extend the invite to a lot of people. So, and personally, Meme, because my family is actually big and Meme has a lot of friends, and Meme, people were really invested in my wedding. Meme actually came with 20 guests. So I had 20 guests from my mother's family. And then those 20 guests would generally be your parents, your grandparents, their close friends, your aunties and uncles that were the heronas of the wedding, and then your siblings. And then if you have friends, then they can be part of that delegation. That was about it from my mother's side, but you'd also have guests from your husband's side, because remember, it's two families uniting, and depending on whether your parents-in-laws are married to each other, that would influence the number of guests. So if they're married to each other, then it's fine, because you only have guests from one household, as opposed to if they're not married to each other, you'd have a few guests from your mother-in-law's family, and then you're going to have a few guests from your father-in-law's family. So in our case, my parents-in-laws aren't married to each other, so we had my mother-in-law came with her delegation of 8 guests, and then my father-in-law, because he's the one that is hosting, because when you do Iitalapata, and you normally do it in your parents-in-law's house, so he had a few guests that he has invited. So if I take my 20 guests from my mother, plus the 8 guests that came with my mother-in-law, plus a few guests that my father-in-law had, plus the community. Remember, in the north, you never really do an event that the community doesn't come. You always need to be, have a bit of extra to actually save the neighbors that are coming to the community, that are coming from the community. So we are looking at roughly just over 50 guests that came to Iitalapata. So that is normally the guest element of it. Now let's look at the actual expenses now. So you'd have the reception, and the reception really is now what I want to talk about, the costs that are involved in the reception. So assuming you already have your structure that is in place and you are ready to host, what then happens? So for us, really the financial preparation started with us now building the structure. I'm going to put up the two structures that are there. We'll build, remember I said we built from corrugated iron, so we had to buy the poles to hold the structure. We had to buy the corrugated iron, we had to buy the door that would close the storage house, and then we had to buy cement to finish the flooring, because you need the place preferably floored with cement, so that you keep away, especially the mice and the mice or mouse. They normally destroy a lot of things, so we had to floor it. So if I look at the cost, that the total cost that we actually spent to get that structure up, it was 7,600. The reason why it was 7,600, but we didn't do it in the month where we were actually hosting the event. The good thing about planning is you get to spread your cost over a period of time. You don't just wake up this month, next month is my Iitalapata. You need to give yourself at least 2 or 3 months, so that this month you tackle this, the next month you tackle this, so that the things don't get too much on your shoulder. So the bulk of this went to really the corrugated iron and the door. The door was quite surprisingly expensive. It was the door and its frame, it was 2.2. And I'm just like, why are things this expensive? And cement, we didn't actually buy, all the cement that we used wasn't entirely new. We had a few cement that was left from another project that we had, so we just used those cement, so it was a little bit of a relief for us. So really, depending, the structure wasn't too big. I'll put up the structure, things are just really expensive. So that is the cost of us putting up the storage on the Kupungura, so those are the two costs that were involved in the 7,600. Then we had the reception. So depending on the number of guests, it's going to influence your reception cost. So we had to decide whether we need to slaughter a cow or we need to slaughter a goat. Traditionally, you are actually expected to slaughter a cow, and cows are like at least 8,000. And we just thought we don't have that many guests that would need to that would necessitate us to actually slaughter a cow. So what we eventually did is we slaughtered 2 goats. If we had slaughtered 1 goat, it wasn't going to be enough, so we actually stretched it to 2. So the 2 goats costed us, including transport, costed us 2,600. Then we had chickens that I bought from my mother. I'm going to put up a picture here. My mother needed some money for cooking oil for her fat cake business, and I needed chicken for my event, so she actually sold me 10 chickens for 600, so I had those. So I just want to elaborate here on the chickens. Not everyone at the event is actually meant to be served chicken, for example. I just have 10 chickens because my mother needed 600 and she was selling me 10 chickens, so I took all the 10 chickens. But you don't have to buy that much. At minimum, you really just need a chicken for the your parents, your two sets of parents. I'm really getting confused. Parents and parents-in-law. You need a chicken for your parents, your parents-in-law. You need a chicken for the 2 heronas, and then you maybe need a chicken for your grandparents. So you need minimum 5 chickens. So you don't need to serve everyone chicken at the event. So the chicken costed us 600, and then you needed food and drink. So we really just spent 4,000 for food, 4.2 for foods and drinks. So what we did is, things were really expensive, and you guys have seen how the price of food has gone up over the last couple of months. And like cooking oil is like 102 in Metro, for example. In the north, or it was 96. It was ridiculous. So we spent around about 1.5 in food and 1.5 in drinks. The drinks we're looking at a lot fewer, and we thought we won't be able to save the number of guests with the drinks that we bought, but we actually decided no, we must buy the drinks that are within our budget. And I do know that Oshiwambo people will never come to an event without bringing a crate of cold drinks, without bringing a 6 packs of beer, without bringing. So what we actually did is we decided the drinks that they are bringing is the drinks that we are going to be serving them. Whilst they're at the reception, we'll give them, whilst they're at the reception, we'll take the drinks, because normally when the guests come, they come in the house, you take their parcels and then you go put them in your storage room, then the guests would go do the other agenda. So while they're doing the other agendas, we took those drinks, we put them in ice blocks so that they can cool down. And then when we served the drinks first, we served the ones that we had already cooled down in the freezer, the ones we bought. And then after they were done with those drinks, we then started serving the drinks that they brought. So if we had actually gone and bought enough drinks for them, we would have been sitting with the excess drinks that they bought. So that is the strategy that we actually took. So in total, we spent about, on the reception, we spent about 7,000, and the 7,000 was the 2.6 for the goats and the 4.2 for the food and the drinks, and then the 600 for the chicken. So that is the cost that we eventually have. But obviously, depending on the number of guests that you have, you might not need to go to 7,000, but because we had over 50 people, you can't feed, and the cost of the inflation is really just high. We couldn't really feed them with less money than that. But the one thing that I actually also want to highlight here is the menu that you have for your event. Don't have too many recipes that would require a lot of ingredients. We had three recipes. We had potato salad and macaroni salad, and we had rice. And then we had pap, and pap was only served for the categories of people that were served chicken. And then we have traditional spinach, because that is a mandatory food that you must serve. So basically, the more recipes you have, the more money you're likely to spend. Then we had some bean salad, but the beans were actually left over from the wedding, and they were just in the storeroom that we actually kept from there, but they were expiring in September this year. So we thought, let's just make a bean salad and actually use up this excess food that is actually coming from the wedding. So basically, that was the cost of the event. So if I add the 7,400 plus the 7,600, it worked around about 16,600. So 16,600 is what it costed us to host Iitalapata. But remembering that of that, not the whole 16 is actually spent in 1 month, not the whole 16 is actually spent on the party. The other money is actually spent on building the structure that you're going to be using in the house. And when you eventually move out to your parents-in-law, most families would allow you to actually deconstruct that structure and take it with, so that you can set it up eventually where you are going to settle. So that's just the one part that I wanted to highlight with regards to this. So just to come into an end here, I just want to highlight some other costs that we could have had that we didn't have. So number one, the cost of wood. Depending on where you are, wood can be a scarce resource or not. For us, we actually were meant to go buy wood, but something happened. We ended up just using the wood that was in the house. But obviously, if you are at a place where there's no wood, like if I was hosting this party at my mother's village, I would definitely needed to buy wood, and wood would have been expensive for that. So don't forget to budget for wood if you are living in a place where wood is a lot scarce. And number two, catering items. So to cater for this 50 guests, you need chairs, you need tables, you need plates, you need spoons, you need serving dishes, you need all sorts of things where you're going to be serving this. And because we took the decision, if you watch the video that I did on finance series for the wedding process, if you don't, please go watch it. I have a whole video on wedding finances, and one of the things that we actually decided to do is to buy our own catering items instead of hiring them out, so that we have the things in future for events like this. So we actually are now using these items for the 4th time in the row. We used it at my first reception, my husband's reception, we used it at my mother-in-law's retirement party, and we are using it for Iitalapata, and my sister is getting married, we are using the same thing. So if you are in a position to buy some of these things, buy it so that you don't have to keep hiring. So we didn't have to cater to actually incur anything on catering related cost. And there was a debate on whether we must get a tent or where the people are going to sit. Eventually we ended up using a hall that was in the house. We actually just put the mats and laid out the whole place and decorated the place with the items that we had, and we used that event. So we actually waited for the sun to cool down a little bit, so that the shade can, if you've been to the north, you'd know that when the sun is in a certain position, the shade of anything falls on a certain side. So we waited, I think past 4 o'clock-ish there, the shade had started returning. So we actually just set up the chairs along the shade so that the people can sit for the small gathering and the prayer, and then thereafter everyone moved in the hall, and then we served the food there. We didn't actually have to hire a tent. So depending on your situation, you might have to hire a tent, but I wouldn't say go hire a tent that's at the level of a wedding tent. You must hire a tent, those NDF tent that generally people set up at funerals, etc. That tent, because all you need is really shade for people to sit in. It's not really supposed to be at the decorative level of the wedding. So basically, yeah, that is really the cost of our Iitalapata, and that is the cost of what goes in Iitalapata. And I just wanted to bring it out because it's very rare that you see such information be put out, and you have people that have been married for so long that don't want to do Iitalapata because they think it's expensive, or that don't want to do Iitalapata because they are copying what other people have done, and because those people had money, they are thinking they also need to spend that much money. Or you have people that just don't know where to start. So this is the reason why I'm actually bringing this video, and I'm just going to end off with tips here. So remember to finish your structure before the actual event, so that you can lessen the burden on your budget, because if you combine these things in 1 month, it's going to be really expensive. Because imagine us putting a dent of 16,000 in our budget to actually host this thing. It was not going to work. Number two, minimize the menu at your event, so that you have the less recipes you have, the less items you have on the menu, the fewer the ingredients would be. Drinks, you must strategize. Vambos will always drink drinks at an event, because they would also want to drink, and if they don't bring the drinks, what will you serve them? So don't buy the full budget of what you expect everyone to pop up. Buy 80%, and then the other 20% you make up with what they bring. And if you can, call up your mother and say, "Mother, are you planning to bring drinks here? I'm just trying to strategize." And I would have called my mother, but because I already knew my mother, she was going to bring, so I just decided, let's rather strategize this. And lastly, do what you can afford and do what your pocket can accommodate. That's all I really had from this discussion. Thank you so much. In the comment section below, please let us know what is your experience, what did you learn from this, and also just give this video a thumbs up, a like, or share it with your friends and family if you really learned a lot from it. Otherwise, thank you so much and it's goodbye.